Um, Welcome to this virtual event hosted by the Raston Library in Equality, Virginia. My name is Michelle. A few housekeeping things to start out with. Here's the rundown for the event. So first, our speaker is going to give a brief presentation, and then the rest of the night is reserved for your questions. So I'll let you know when it's time for questions, and at that time, you can either unmute your mic and speak and ask a question out that way, or you can ask a question in the chat, and I will read it out loud. So let's go ahead and get started. So our speaker tonight is Anne Murdoch. Anne grew up in Homewood, Illinois, outside of Chicago, but now lives in Springfield, Virginia. She served 24 years in the U.S. Army, attaining the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, and received many awards for her service. She now works as a program analyst for the Department of Veteran Affairs and is also involved in the Methodist and Metropolitan Community Churches. In her spare time, she enjoys hiking, camping, bike riding, and being a private pilot. She has 2 children as well as a dog and a cat. So thank you so much, Anne. And welcome, everyone.
Great. So in 2006, I deployed to Afghanistan as a deputy personnel officer for a 20,000 strong multinational joint task force. When I deployed, I had my pistol, I had a couple duffel bags, my rucksack, my helmet, my ID tags, and I carried a secret. A soldier's very careful with their equipment. I had my pistol on a lanyard tied to my belt. I had padlocks on my duffel bags. I kept everything close in hand to keep an eye on it. But most of all, I guarded my secret. My secret wasn't that I was a spy. I wasn't stealing government secrets or doing anything illegal or anything like that. But my secret could have got me kicked out of the Army, could have ended my career, maybe even cost me my family. My secret was I was disguised as a man. I wore the disguise ever since I was about 4 years old, and I realized that something was different between the way I felt inside and the way I was on the outside. But back in those days, sissies got the tar beat out of them, so I wore the disguise. And I was really good at it. I watched everything I did, everything I said, every gesture I made. I was very careful to monitor myself. And over the years, it got harder and harder, though. Which brings me to that night in Afghanistan. And it really doesn't matter which one it was because so many of them were all the same. During the 14-hour days or so, I had lots of distractions. I was really busy, a lot of things to keep my mind off of it. But at night, my secret would take free rein to me. And I thought I was caught between living a lie that would destroy me or living a life that I just couldn't sustain anymore. And it got to be so bad that sometimes I wondered if that's what it felt like to go insane. And I couldn't see any alternatives. I couldn't see any way out. And sometimes at night, I'd take my pistol in one hand and the magazine in the other hand. And I'd think, I have a way out right here in my hands. But I think about my family and I think tomorrow, if I need to, I can do that tomorrow, but not today. And I strung together a bunch of tomorrows, but it kept getting harder and harder. And eventually I had high blood pressure. I was diagnosed with depression. I had an ulcer, insomnia. I was having anxiety attacks. And I realized that if I didn't do something, my family would lose me. And in many ways that they already had. I had to face my gender dysphoria. And it was really hard. It took gallons and gallons of tears. And it was especially hard on my wife, but through it all, love won. And together, today our relationship's stronger than ever. It was hard on my kids too. I was really concerned about them, but they showed me the way. One day when I was having a check-in with my daughter, I asked her how she was doing, and she looked at me with worry and fear in her eyes, and she said, "I'm getting ready to start high school. I have bigger problems than a transgender dad." And sometimes it just felt like really absurd, like the day that I got a letter from my insurance company telling me I was due for both a pap smear, and a prostate exam. Go figure that one out. But the reason I'm here is because so many people inspired me and shared their stories, either online or in person at support groups and things like that. And they convinced me that I wasn't alone, that I had hope. And they served as an example that I could make it. And I always drew faith from my uncle, who was a respected White House lawyer and corporate lawyer. But he wasn't really, he was known for that, but he was better known because he had cancer for 10 years that he finally succumbed to, and also alcoholism. And he was very open about his alcoholism, and he'd go to AA meetings, and he was noted in his obituary in the Madison, Wisconsin paper for, no matter how sick he was, if he could do it, he would go up the stairs to attend an AA meeting so he could share his story and inspire and encourage others. And I'm motivated by that every day, following his example and just repaying the people that did so much to help me and get me through this so I could survive and be there with my family. And I found that as I share my story, other people always come back to me with their story. And we build that connection between each other, and we inspire each other. And we let each other know that we're not alone and we can help each other out. And it's that sense of community that I think is so important and so critical today, which is why I'm so excited to be able to share this with you today and do the important work of Equality Virginia and the Speakers Bureau. So I ask every one of you that's listening, who needs to hear your story? How can you uplift and share and help somebody else by sharing your story and letting them know that they're not alone and encouraging them and hearing theirs back? Because when I deployed to Afghanistan, I had my pistol, I had my helmet, I had a couple duffel bags, and I had a secret. And today, all I have is my truth. And today, I'm unashamed and unafraid to say who I am and be proud of who I am. So I ask you, what are you carrying? What's your secret? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ann. So now, time for questions. So folks, just like I said before, you're welcome to unmute your mic yourself and ask a question if you'd like, or you can put one into the chat. So I will allow a couple minutes for you to think of some things to ask our speaker. While we're waiting, I have a question. Kathleen has one. Okay. Kathleen says, hello, Ann. How have you connected with your local queer community?
Well, a few years ago, I got involved with a support group in Fairfax that meets the second Friday of every month. And that was just life-saving to know that there's so many strong and wonderful people in this community. So that was a huge, huge way to do it. I've also gotten involved with Equality Virginia, so I've made some just absolutely great friendships and connections through Equality Virginia. It's just been amazing, the community that I've met there, and getting involved in LGBTQ plus activities. It's just really been great. There's a lot of different organizations out there. There's even a sailing club that meets at Belhaven Marina that I've gone with a couple times. It got me addicted to sailing. So now I own a 11-foot sailboat. That's just a blast. So those are some of the ways, and it's just really been awesome. It's just the community, the whole community has just been so cool to get to know. And it's been, I didn't have that initially because I was trying to maintain the facade of being a cishet white guy, Army officer, and maintain that image. And when I finally found out what I was missing, it was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is just so cool. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you.
Great.
Okay, a question I had was about actually your pilot experience. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about that because there's so few women pilots in the US, and I thought that was really
Yeah, so I started flying before I transitioned, and part of it was something to do to sort of keep my mind off of my gender dysphoria, and I felt like it gave me a kind of a cool cred, but it's also so much fun. It's something, you know, you can take a flying lesson. You don't need any experience, anything. You can just go. A lot of places, of course, are not doing it right now because of COVID. But when that's not a concern, you can just go to a flight school and ask to take a lesson. I mean, even if it's just 1 hour, you can go sightseeing, and most instructors will give you some experience controlling the airplane. And it's not cheap, but it is a lot of fun. And no matter how many times I went, every single flight, I'd look out the window at some point and think, this is just so cool. It's just so cool. And I know a few trans pilots that are retired military, and there's some that are commercial pilots, airline pilots in the civilian sector too, that weren't in the military. So it's definitely something that's open to a lot of people, and gender should never be an issue there because you know, you don't need brute strength to control an airplane. In fact, my one instructor, I was holding onto the yoke too tightly, and he told me to relax, and he put a pencil between my fingers, and if you broke the pencil, it was too much. In fact, I went had an awesome experience doing aerobatics. I took an aerobatic lesson at Potomac Airfield, and the flight instructor, her nickname was Buckwheat, and she was just amazing. It was so much fun. So if you ever want to try it, go do it.
I think that is an awesome answer, and I very much would like to try it. So we're getting a bunch more questions in the chat. So this first one is, I hope this question isn't too personal. You're definitely not obligated to answer. How do you feel like your relationship with dysphoria has changed after coming out and transitioning?
That's an interesting question. It's definitely changed a lot. It has not gone away. I don't know any trans person who is ever free from dysphoria, no matter how long they've been transitioned or when they transitioned, or you know, any other factor. It's always present. The main thing that's really changed is the shame and the guilt associated with it. That's the thing that was so toxic, is the feeling of shame, like you're doing something wrong. And all those years of seeing all the tropes about, you know, cross-dressers. I mean, even something like the Monty Python Lumberjack song, which I never thought much of at the time, but now I think about it, it's like, that was really transphobic. You know, and there's a lot of comedians that cross-dress for laughs. They had the 3 C's. It was the clown, the criminal, and the crazy. Those are the 3 stereotypes of trans people in popular media for decades and decades. And it's like, especially as a kid, it's almost impossible not to internalize that. And it's taken so long just to let go of that and think, you know, okay, this is just something that happened to me, like being born with brown hair, or being left-handed, or, you know, being tall or short, or your skin color, or whatever. You know, everybody kind of gets a roll of the genetic dice, and this is just what I got. So it's not my fault. It's just how do I deal with it? And what example do I set for anybody else that might be struggling with something? So that's the main thing that's changed. And it's definitely, I don't feel like it controls my life so much, because I'm not worried about trying to keep the secrets and hide and worry about everything. It's like, I feel so much more mental energy and just so much more free time, which, kind of seems weird, but I'm not living a double life anymore. And it's just so liberating and so empowering.
Thank you. We got another one, which is, do you have any suggestions for supporting newly out trans friends?
Be patient with them. It's very for me, it was very tumultuous. I think that's a pretty common experience. And it's not just the person that transitions, it's everybody around them that has to transition too. So any big change, my opinion, comes with some grief. And it definitely was something that our family went through, the changes, and you think about the loss of what you used to have, and you're not sure what you're going to have. And it's the same for close friends and colleagues and other people that have a relationship with anybody that changes, makes a big change for any reason, whether it's getting married or health reasons or anything like that. And we think of our relationships in terms of kind of like, how does it impact me? And when somebody else changes, we think, okay, they're different. How does that affect our relationship now? And the closer you are, the bigger a deal that is. And you go through the stages of grief, and there's anger and denial and acceptance and all the other, and you sort of ping pong around the different stages, if you will, until you land, you kind of get further away from it. And most people come to acceptance. But then I talked to some colleagues of mine that were there when I transitioned at work, and I had a really good discussion with one who was pretty honest and frank with me in a nice, caring way. But he said, he lost his father shortly after, a year or two after I transitioned. And he said it would have been good to have had some kind of like change management almost to help the people around deal with it, which sounds weird, but he experienced the impacts of his father passing away and the major, upheaval in his life in a sort of similar fashion to what I experienced. And, you're not in isolation, so it impacts the other people. So I would say to support people, be patient, be open, be kind and respectful. Sometimes people slip up on a name or the gender or something like that. My preference is if that happens and it's, just, apologize and move on. Don't make a big deal out of it. And the other thing is, for me, and I think for a lot of other people, it's a really fragile time. And we're looking for reassurance. So a lot of emotions and things like that are kind of on a hair trigger. So just lend an ear and be there and be steady and be patient with people that are in any kind of major transition.
Thank you so much. So our next question touches on some similar things, but perhaps you can expand on it. So the question from the audience member is, how did your coming out experience vary with different people? Did it get easier over time, or did it depend on the relationship you had with the person you were coming out to?
That was interesting. It sort of got easier, but it didn't. And the surprising thing for me was it was in some ways, I mean, the people that are most close to me, my immediate family and my dad, it was really hard to kind of get the words out. And of course, they were all like super supportive and loving. I couldn't have asked for anything better. But once the words came out and things kind of went along, and then like people at work, it wasn't as hard because I really didn't care as much of what they thought, but they were like, oh, okay, all right, that's cool, which in hindsight would have been better to have spent a little bit more time on it, but so it's not really, it's kind of hard to say. But the hardest people in a lot of ways were the people I didn't see very often. you know, and you don't realize how many people like that you have in your life that are just sort of incidental. But, you know, if you don't see them for a year and all of a sudden you look a lot different, they're going to, you know, so that was almost the most awkward conversations with the people I didn't see very often. But it was always an emotional, it was always hard. It was always like, I've got to explain myself again. And it was just it felt very exhausting to me. And it's not one coming out or two coming out, it's hundreds. And then you got to come out to all the people you have to do transactions with, like your bank and the government and the Social Security Administration and the passport office and driver's license office, and again and again and again and again. It's like, but it's worth it all.
That is a long list. I don't think I'd ever thought.
And I will, let me just add too, that was where the shame really started coming apart. You know, this thing that I was so shameful of and tried to hide so much. And I was like going up to people and say, hey, I have something to tell you. And every time I did that, I was met with acceptance. That shame started going away and going away. So that was really cool. That was the cool part about it.
That is really great to hear. So another question that came in was, how did changing back to civilian life affect you?
It was kind of it sort of put me in a position where I sort of had to face up to things in a way, because as long as I was in the Army, I sort of had an excuse not to deal with it, because, you know, of course you got to maintain your career. So when I retired, you know, there was less inhibition to explore my gender. And as I did that, I knew more and more that I really had to transition and deal with it, because it got harder and harder to go back to living a lie. So that was a big part of it. Had I been able to, I mean, I retired shortly in 2012, and then the discriminatory policy against trans troops was changed in, I believe it was 2016, if I have that right. I would have been really happy to have stayed for a few more years had I been able to, but I just missed it.
Well, thanks to Equality Virginia and everyone who worked so hard to help that change. Another question that came in, if you would like to answer it, is, in your opinion, what should people never ask a trans person?
I don't like to answer like my questions about my own particular medical situation, as far as procedures, or so I would not, please don't ask about, you know, what procedures, if any, they have had done, or what medication they may or may not be taking. To me, that's really off limits. Most trans people I know do not want to tell you what their old name was if they changed their name. Not everybody does. Not every trans person gets any kind of medical. You know, nobody has to do any medical thing if it's not right for them, if they make that choice. Those are probably the two biggest things. And what you should, of course, always ask is, you know, how would you like me to address you? You know, what pronouns do you use? Like my legal name is Mary Ann, but I go by Ann.
Thank you. So another question that we have is, How, if at all, do you feel your gender and your sexuality affect each other? Was that another process of self-exploration you had to go through?
You know, everybody, that's really a really unique, really a very unique thing. I'm not 100% sure how to answer that because I always knew who I was, who I am. So that internal view of myself has never changed. So I don't think my sexuality has changed. So I'll leave it at that for myself, but I have known people who have had marked change. And, you know, I don't know if people's sexuality changes or just their expression of it, you know. But I've known people that have entered much different relationships after they've transitioned and things like that. And I know other people that have stayed in the same relationship and been very happy. So it's probably across the board, but I know it's somewhat common for once people sort of step into their own sense of self, especially if it's later in life, they want to make up for some lost time. So a fair number of my friends have gone through a pretty active period of exploration, if you will. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's about the best I can do. I'm sorry.
I think it certainly does. And the person who asked said thank you. We have a bunch of librarians on this call. So one of them said, what's your favorite book or one you would always recommend? Not necessarily about being trans specifically, just in general.
Oh my gosh, what is my favorite book? I don't know. I just read like a whole bunch of books recently. Some I really liked and some I really didn't. Well, like one I really did not like. Wow. How can I, what would I pick just for one book? I don't know. I'm stumped. I don't have like just one favorite. I can tell you what I read recently. So I finished the Hilary Mantel Wolf Hall trilogy about Thomas Cromwell and King Henry VIII, which I confess, when I got to the end of the third book, I knew how it was going to end. And once he got thrown in the Tower of London, I had to stop reading it for a while because I thought, oh my gosh. And I read another book about the French Revolution by her, and I find her work fascinating because she creates such complex characters and really but without a lot of exposition. She drops in these little hints that just really round out the characters, and she creates so much empathy for these people that were just horrific in real life. I mean, you know, this guy Cromwell like killed a bunch of innocent people, including you know, a queen, and engineered false trials for them, and then he got a taste of his own medicine, but still I'm like, no, not him. So that's one book I like. I've been reading a lot of books on like management books and diversity and inclusion. So I like I read a book by General Stanley McChrystal, Team of Teens, which I really like. So those are a couple that I really enjoyed.
Well, I definitely always appreciate a book recommendation as well. The person who asked us, thank you very much for sharing. I had another question, which was that earlier on you had mentioned, you know, some folks who kind of showed you the way that, you know, were greatly helpful to you. And I was just wondering, you know, if if you could expand maybe more on people either that you know or like in the media or something that you find really inspirational.
I'm sorry, the audio broke up a little bit on that. Could you just recap that?
Of course, yes. So you had mentioned earlier about folks who you had felt kind of showed you the way and helped you make your transition a little bit easier. And so I was wondering, if you were able to expand on that, or if there's anyone you either know or who's in the media that had a positive impact on you.
Well, a couple who I actually had the opportunity to meet in person. I saw their videos. I saw a video by Amanda Simpson, who I'm not sure she still lives in this area, but I've had the opportunity to meet her in person. She was a former acquisitions official in the Department of Defense, retired test pilot. So I thought it was really courageous of her. She was in the Obama administration, really courageous of her to put herself out there like that. And she had a video, where she said, it gets better. It gets better. And to be able to, I met her at a party and just had the opportunity to tell her to her face, thank you for that. When I was still on active duty, Kristen Beck, who was a retired Navy SEAL, transitioned, and there's a lot of headlines regarding her. And she was a big inspiration, and I've gotten to know her a little bit, so we've had some fun together. So she's been, and to be able to tell her, thank you for doing that when I was still deeply in the closet and helping pave the way. Just really, that was just huge. And then, Alexandra Billings, an actress who was on Transparent, and she's very active on Facebook and always just super, super encouraging and positive and just inspirational. And I had the chance, I actually saw her perform on Broadway, and she was in a show that was so funny. And the cast was hilarious, and she was just hysterical. And I think I sprained my some vital organ or something because I was laughing so hard. It was just magic. And we met her backstage afterwards, and met her a couple times. Yeah, people like that have just been. But it's really just my friends and people I know, just that I hang out with, and that are just out there living their lives. And, a lot of them would show up to meetings and things like that and just tell their stories. And it was so important to see people that were happy and successful and, had good relationships with their family and spouses. And because all I'd heard before then was horror stories, to actually meet these people face to face was just, I can't overstate it.
That's really powerful. Another question that we have gotten in is, are there any positive impacts other than the community that being trans has been on your life?
Are there positive impacts? Well, being free of the shame and guilt has been just really helped me out. Then just having all the extra time and things like that's been great. But from tangible points of view, if you want to look at it from has it had any practical advantages? I was asked, I got just by pure chance by somebody knowing somebody that I was one of the people that was photographed for the Out 100 spread on transgender veterans in 2017. So that was really cool to be in a photo shoot and hair and makeup and all that stuff. It's like, oh, this is so cool. But then we got invited to the gala in New York City, and we went down there and just had a blast. Janet Jackson was there, and all these celebrities were there. And it was just absolute magic. It was magic. And I've gotten to meet the governor and other people. I was asked to help support a House resolution supporting transgender military service. So we sat in the gallery during the House when they voted on that, and that was really cool. And then I participated in a press conference on that, which was just such an honor to be able to support the servicemen. And I have to say, let me just kind of go off a little bit off script, but you know, I know a lot of transgender active duty service members, and the way they have been conducting themselves the entire time since the President Trump tweeted out his ban on transgender service has just been exemplary. You know, people in the military have to be apolitical and are limited on what they can say on political matters and things like that. And they've let their servants do the talking, and they are just stellar. I could not be more proud. And yeah, they just learn such. They're just doing such great work. In fact, one of them is probably is about to get promoted to colonel pretty soon, and is one of the first officers in the Space Force. Another trans woman I know is one of the first female infantry officers at Fort Benning, and she's coaching and mentoring some of the other pioneering female infantry officers there. Just incredible stuff that these people are doing. So I have to just highlight that.
Thank you so much for highlighting their excellent work. Another very relevant question that I would like to know the answer to as well is what can we do to support you and Equality Virginia's work? I think most of us are probably local to Fairfax County.
Well, I personally am really excited to be part of Equality Virginia. I first got involved with them. There was a discriminatory piece of legislation that was being introduced into the Virginia House of Delegates by Virginia's self-professed biggest homophobe, who was defeated by Danica Roem, who is an open trans woman from Loudoun County. And she's since been reelected, and she is, talk about inspirational people. Wow. She is so smart. She's so sharp. She won by focusing on issues that were of interest to voters and not discrimination. And she's a heavy metal guitarist. So she's awesome. But I went to talk to my state delegate, who was not comfortable talking to me about that at all. And it was really, really hard. It was like the first time I'd ever come out to anybody, and it was under those circumstances. Well, everybody was running through the quarters, the legislative office building, and he wasn't even looking at me when I was telling him this most personal, intimate thing about myself. He was on his computer, and I was just, it was devastating. Well, not devastating, but it was just took everything I had. And James Parrish, who was the executive director of Equality Virginia, somehow I connected with him beforehand. He said, well, come by afterwards and tell us how it went. And when I went in there, he and the current director, V. Lamnick, they just were so supportive and kind, and gave me a place to sort of kind of crash and recover, and just heard me out and encouraged me to stay engaged. So ever since then, and realizing the impact of it, I'd go down and participate in the Equality Virginia's Day of Action. So people can do that. They can talk to their state. Something at the state level is you can actually talk to your representatives. You can talk to your delegate, and they're accessible. And so you really do have an ability to influence what's going on in Richmond. And you can talk to them face to face. You can send them emails. You can send them letters. You can give them phone calls. If you have the financial support or financial resources to do it, donations always go a long way. And there's some things that are pending in the next term for the General Assembly. So if people want to contact their delegates and state senators about those things, it's really important that we get the Foster Care Bill of Rights to include LGBTQ plus youth to make sure that they're protected. I mean, what an extremely vulnerable population. So we've got to stand by them. We want to make sure we ban the panic defense so that somebody can justify assault or murder on an LGBTQ plus person based off of, oh, I thought they're hitting me, or some other kind of panic defense. We want to make that gone. It should never be a defense. We need to modernize the HIV law, bring that up to 21st century. We want to make sure that LGBTQ plus elders are included as a target population in the American Aging Act. It's another highly vulnerable population that we need to stand with and protect. And we want to make sure that marriage equality is defended, and that everybody has that basic same right to the dignity of the relationship with the person that's most important to them, and that's recognized equally under the law. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh gosh, there we go. I know how to use Zoom. It's only been
I know, I did it.
So we've got a couple more questions. I also just wanted to highlight that since we're the Reston Library, we've been working really closely with Reston Pride. So if folks are local to Reston, please get involved with Reston Pride. If you need, there's a website, but if you need contact information, let me know and I'd be happy to send it to you. We're super proud to have received the first ever Best Community Facility Award from Reston Pride this year. Here at the Reston Library, so we're super excited about that. And so,
there's a lot of really good groups in Northern Virginia.
We are fortunate that a lot of people are working hard. A question we just got in is very interesting. Have you ever watched Miss Trans Universe Thailand and thought about joining it?
And thought about doing what?
Thought about joining it. I'm assuming it's a television show.
I have not. I'm not one big on. I have sort of mixed feelings about things like beauty contests, and a lot of people are, they hold up trans actresses and actors as great role models, which they are. But it bothers me a little bit when people, especially in trans exclusive groups, post pictures on Facebook or other social media, and people respond, "Oh, you look so great, you look so great." At least to the women, they do that. And I don't see those kind of comments for the men. So I think it's really cool. I'm so glad that trans people are able to participate in events like that want to. That's just sort of not my cup of tea, though. But thank you for even thinking about that. It's flattering.
And another question that we had coming in is, any advice for young queer people who may be questioning their gender?
Wow, great question. Let me think about that a little bit, because it depends on each person's situation and what they feel safe doing it, because not everybody has a supportive home environment or has a supportive environment. There's still transphobia out there, and there's still some people that have some really bad reactions to it. So everything I say, take with that in mind to judge, what you might do. But if you have the ability and you feel safe doing it, I would encourage you to explore your gender identity different ways and see, and just kind of feel out what's comfortable for you, what feels right. And I think for some people, it varies a little bit from time to time. I mean, there's, as you, I'm sure there's people that are gender fluid. And I think anybody, cis people, trans people, gay, straight, whoever you are, feels sort of more towards the masculine end of the spectrum, or a little bit maybe across the center line. Other people, you know, and you sort of have times where you're more on one side of the spectrum or the other side, regardless of how you identify or what your gender is as an identity. So it's not unusual to feel, I think, some variance inside of that, your own personal parameters, which I found at first, and to an extent still do, find a little bit confusing. And that's why I bring that up, because I think for some people like myself, it could be a little bit confusing, especially at first. So I would say don't be too surprised by that, and really just explore it. And I think a qualified gender therapist is gold. It's gold. I'm so blessed, so lucky that that I've had that support, and to help explore and not even be a guide, but be a sounding board, and be somebody that you can sort of, if they've worked with a lot of other trans people, they can kind of give you an idea of what's sort of the common experience, and then help you understand how your own experience does or doesn't fit in with that, and how you might see things. So those are a couple things. And then, you know, seek out other people that have a shared similar experience with that. You know, it could be other trans youth, could be older trans people, or a combination or whatever. But I think that sense of community is really, really important, especially if, you know, when you're starting out, because it could be a little daunting, even for young people, even with really supportive parents. I've known some people that have they've been great, they've done great, but other people have put up some challenges for them that that I'm not sure how well they would have been able to handle it without that level of support. And as an example, I think of Gavin Grimm. You talk about inspirational people. I met him, and he was the one who took his case to the Supreme Court to defend his right to use the boys and men's restroom in his high school. And I cannot imagine having the courage at that age to do what he did, and to come out and face everything that he faced, and all the organized right-wing groups. And he stood tall through it all and really affected change. And his case was not heard because he graduated before the Supreme Court ever heard it. So they decided it was moot. And then another girl who was in high school, and during a mass shooting drill, they had her sit on the bleachers while they tried to figure out if she should go hide in the girls' locker room or the boys' locker room during gym. And it's like, really? You know, it's a life and death situation that you're training for, and you're going to sit there and let her and worry about something as dumb as that? Sorry, I got a little bit off topic, but I just say that to illustrate that even under the best of circumstances, there can be challenges to that sense of community. And that if you can find it, that expert support, I found very, very beneficial. And just explore it, and just be you, be you, be you.
And I think we've gotten our last question of the night, which is, do you feel there's still progress to be made for including more LGBTQ plus people in movies and television shows?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think, you know, when people stop talking about it, then we'll know that we're there, maybe. You know, if it's still a thing that, you know, oh, the first trans actor, the first trans actress, the first, you know, this or that. I think to me that tells us that we have work to do.